The first tool that we're going to be requiring for this changing of bevel gears is going to be just really and truly a flathead screwdriver. We're going to be using this flathead screwdriver to actually be taking off this cover on the sides of the control, or the lower rod that is housing and shielding the hook. Next tool we're going to be using is actually going to be a larger flathead. This one we're actually going to be using quite a bit. We're going to be using this to go ahead and take off the hook. That's going to be loosening the 3 screws on the hook itself, and then going on the back and taking off the cover with this flathead. Another tool that we are going to be using is going to be this smaller flathead tool. We're going to be using this primarily just to take off the cover and all the tight areas that we cannot reach. So this is going to be for the needle plate as well as the bridge plate that's on the back, just so we can actually access it and utilize a flathead to take it off. Next, we are going to be using some Allen keys. These Allen keys, primarily what we're going to be using is going to be a 3mm, but it is highly recommended to actually have a whole set. That way you can use the correct tool when needed. The last tool that we are going to be needing is going to be some metal sheet spacers. This is actually going to be used whenever we're placing the new bevel gears into place. This is just to give it enough space from the back of the machine to allow for rotation of the bevel gear. Then you should already have received your bevel gear. This bevel gear is just for demo purposes. We will be reusing the bevel gear in this machine because this bevel gear is actually so good. And lastly, because of where the bevel gear is actually located, it has grease. This is the grease that we highly recommend. You can actually find this at your local Home Depot. But with this grease, we're going to be replacing the grease that is already in the bevel gear location with this new grease, or applying new grease to actually replace it and have it, make sure it's uncontaminated grease that we're actually putting in there. So once you have all those tools, we can go ahead and begin with removing the plate, and then we're more or less taking everything from the front here off, and I will show that. Okay, so with this tool here, which I had shown earlier, we're gonna go ahead and remove the needle plate. The needle plate is what we're gonna need to remove first. And it does have 2 screws. And you're just gonna go ahead and, I typically go ahead and just loosen the top 2. Once it has been loosened, then I'll just go with this tool and just spin the Phillips head side of it to just remove these screws fully. So that's going to be 1 screw removed. And now we're going to go for screw 2. And we can go ahead and just take off the needle plate. Next, we're going to go ahead with that flathead screwdriver and just take off these covers here. These covers are actually held in with 2 screws as well, and once you have them loosened, I would hold on to the cover, and then you can just bring it down and off. Don't lose these screws for these covers because they're actually relatively small. they are going to be pretty difficult to get new of. And then you're going to do the same to the cover on the left side. Now that you've gotten to this point, you're going to go ahead with the larger flathead. We're going to go ahead and remove the hook. So with regards to the hook, it actually is going to involve rotating the main shaft, which you can access the main shaft from underneath. From underneath here, that way you can rotate the hook a little bit to actually access the 3 screws. And you're not actually going to be taking off the screws, you're just rotating it, or you're unscrewing it enough to where about 1 or 2 turns, full turns. Nothing more, nothing less. So if we go ahead and let me move the camera a little bit, that way you can see better on the side. You're gonna go ahead and locate a screw. Once you have, just insert the flathead. And just 1 full turn is what I did just now. You can follow that as well, or please do follow it exact. Now we're going to locate screw 2. And then screw 3. Once you've already gone ahead and unscrewed these screws, you're not going to be pulling on the hook at all at this current time. You're going to want to go ahead and there's this little bar here, or a bridge really, and you're going to go ahead and unscrew this bridge and take this bridge off. That way you can actually remove the hook without getting interference from this bridge, because this bridge is actually using it to lock the hook in place. So this bridge is actually unscrewed from underneath. You can locate it, and once you have your flathead, you're going to go ahead and unscrew it completely and make sure to catch the screw before it does fall. And then we're going to go ahead and loosen. So we're going to give this one a good 1, 2 turns. Let's go 3. You can give it a good 3 turns and then just slide it to the left. Once you've done all this, the hook should be able to go ahead and just pull out. Should be able to pull out, but in the off chance that you aren't able to pull it, that's okay. That just means that one of the screws are still down pretty well. Be careful whenever you are rotating the main shaft from underneath, because as you rotate, since this guard isn't here, there is a guard up here that rotates with the rotation of the hook. If the rotation of that hook is incorrect, or if this is up and the needle hits it, it can break your needle even though the machine is not on. So be mindful of where this is located. Try to keep the open gap. Try to keep that open gap up top. That way there's 0 chance of anything actually hitting the needle. To do that, as you're rotating, typically just have the flathead holding the guard of the hook, and then just rotate as needed until you find the screw that you need to loosen, and then go ahead and loosen that screw if it does require more loosening. So once you've gone ahead and loosened everything, you should just be able to slide the hook out. Just bring it out. So to properly demonstrate these locations of these screws and how loosened they should be, location is actually going to be right here, or just on the inner side of the collar. See them here and here. 3 screws. They are going to be just loose enough to where you can actually get them out. And if you look inside the barrel, you should be able to see just a clean barrel. It doesn't have any of the screws poking out. So once you have removed this, you should have these following items on the table of the machine or on a separate table. These items including the needle plate, the 2 needle or the hook guards, the hook itself, and then the screws for the items that we had removed. These 2 are for the needle plate. You have 4 screws that go to your needle or hook guard, and then your hook support right there. And you should be looking at a machine wise, you should be looking at it as such, that it has been disassembled to the point that you see the shaft here, and at this point you can go ahead with a screwdriver, flathead. I'm going to go ahead and use this tool here. We're going to lift up the needle, or the needle. That way it's actually out of our way and we can have a proper reach back behind. And we're going to go ahead and get this screw that is located right behind the needle plate for the neck of the hook here. We're going to take this screw out. And that's going to be all that we can do from the front half of the machine. Next, we're going to go to the back. Now that we're at the back of the machine, you're going to go ahead and access the screw and go ahead and unscrew it. We're going to go ahead and place it down somewhere where you can actually keep it safeguarded. Next, you're going to actually go ahead and grab the pantographer. We're just going to pull it back, and that way you have access to this middle screw that is located. I'm just going to go ahead and do the same and take it off completely. And once again, safeguarding the screw, that way you don't lose it. And while we have the pantographer back here, we're also going to just remove this cover, and we can just place it back next to where we're keeping our screws or other equipment. Then we're going to move it forward, our pantographer, and just access to the plate here, and then we're just going to remove the 4 screws located on the plate. So once you've gone ahead and removed the screws, you're just going to go ahead and pop the cover. And now we can take a look at more of the internals. Since this is a 2-head machine, we're actually doing it on head 2. In comparison to you should be on head 3 and 5. So we're not going to be worrying too much with regards to these portions here. We're mainly just focusing on the inner box that is behind the neck of the machine. So what you're going to want to do first is, with a rag, clean up any of the oil and or grease that you have in the box there. In this case, we're going to have to clean up quite a bit of grease, and we're just going to get a rag, or really, just get a rag and go ahead and just clean up the oil and grease that you see inside of this box. Once you have done that, we'll go on to the next. So you've gone ahead and cleaned it. So some tricks and some little tips that I've found whenever you're cleaning the bevel gear chamber is that you can go ahead with a Allen wrench that actually, if you're doing head 8, you can use this Allen wrench here. All you're doing is just putting it in place to use it for leverage on rotating the main shaft. That way you can access more of the bevel gear to clean. And another tool that you can utilize while cleaning let me go ahead and put this back where it was. Another tool that you can utilize is going to be the flathead screwdriver. That way you can help push the rag down, and in the tight spaces like here, you can utilize it to, once you've pushed down the rag, to move the rag to where you want to go ahead and get and clean up. Those are some little tips and tricks that you can utilize while cleaning the chamber. And then once you have gone ahead and cleaned the chamber, to give you a more in-depth look, so the chamber is going to be looking as such. To where there's no added or extra grease. I'm not quite sure what that is, but we're gonna go ahead and clean that out. Just to give you a look at the bevel gear itself, which is this gear here. Gonna do this Allen trick. Just rotate, take a look, make sure we got all the grease. And if so, I just go ahead and put it back upright. And that's gonna be a completely clean bevel gear chamber. So you've just completed the cleaning of all the grease within the chamber. Now we're gonna go ahead and just remove the knife, or just lifting up here. And then if you can reach over to the front and just lift up and push it towards yourself. That way you just have it out, and you're just gonna slide it out. You're gonna go ahead and place it on the side with the rest of your equipment. And now we're gonna go ahead and loosen to take off the bevel gear itself. So for me, what I'm gonna be doing is utilizing this tool here, so I can actually move the bevel gear around. That way I can actually get to the 2 screws. But you might have to actually reach from underneath to move the, so once again, this is just so that I can move the main shaft. But whenever you are trying to move the main shaft so you can actually get a better angle at the screw there, just go ahead and reach underneath and grab the shaft and just move it as needed. That way you can rotate the bevel gear and you can actually see the screws that you need to go ahead and loosen. There are going to be 2 screws on the bevel gear itself, and then we're going to be using an Allen wrench 3. And then just go ahead and loosen it. So we have one loosened. We're not gonna completely remove it. We're gonna go ahead and rotate for the second screw once we have loosened the first one. And once you've gotten both of them loosened, you can go ahead and, so you should have already gone ahead and loosened it. I'm going to be using this trick again just so you can visualize it. But once again, whenever you are trying to move the main shaft, rather than using this like I am doing here, using this bearing, you're actually going to be reaching underneath and grabbing the hook or the main shaft from there. Or you can have someone else reach from the front of the machine and go ahead and move it for you. But you want to go ahead and have just a lip of the screw out, and then same for the other screw, just a little bit. Like this one, we can remove it or just bring it out just a little bit more. So we're gonna go ahead and just loosen it, another thread, and that's gonna be it. The next step is actually gonna be a little bit more difficult, as you're gonna have to be pushing the shaft, the bevel gear shaft out, so that the bevel gear itself just drops down. So to do that, we're gonna go ahead and use this flathead, and we're gonna go from the back here. Let me remove the camera once again, that way you can show you. If we look back here, you'll see that there's some space, or this ring here. That ring that I just moved slightly, that is what we're gonna wanna push out. So we're just gonna slide it out if it can get slidden. If it can't slide, that's when you're gonna go ahead with a flathead and just give it a little push, push, push until it's out. Okay, and then we're just gonna grab the bevel gear itself, as it did just drop. And we're gonna go ahead and put it here. To reach this point, you're gonna have these following tools and items set aside. This is gonna be the knife lever. This is what controls the knife going in and out. Your screws, your neck cover, and then your bevel gear cover as well. And then you're also gonna be including your bevel gear itself. You're gonna see that your bevel gear does not have that ring. That is because we're gonna be reusing this ring. And we're just gonna go ahead and place it onto the new bevel gear. In this case, it will use this bevel gear here. And we're gonna be placing the bevel gear in place for where it would be. Or in this case, really and truly not placing, but putting down the shaft out just a little bit. We're gonna go ahead, place the washer, and then we're placing the bevel gear itself. This may be difficult, and we're gonna be talking more in depth in one moment, if it is difficult. So now you're gonna go ahead and just put with some of the grease that you have, and go ahead and put a little bit on your finger. Just a little bit, and you're gonna go ahead and run it around that hole where the shaft just came out. And the reason why we're doing this is actually just to help with holding this washer up. It makes it a little bit more simpler to actually hold it in place, rather than it falling and slipping and you having to deal with it a lot more. And it also does help whenever the machine is actually running. So we're gonna go ahead and with the flathead, we're gonna give this a little nudge back. So once it's actually back, you'll actually have, if you go ahead and try moving the main shaft, you're gonna notice that the bevel gear itself doesn't move. And that's what we're looking for. The bevel gear itself is not moving, and that's what we want. So you've gone ahead and put some grease on your washer, or on the outer rim before you put the washer on. Next, what we're actually gonna go ahead and do is with this flathead, or a flathead, you're gonna go up against the bearing, the metal bearing or metal bevel gear. You're just going to give it a little tap until it moves back. That way it is going to be out of our way whenever we are putting in the bevel gear itself. So at this point, after you've gone ahead and tapped the metal bevel gear back, we're going to go ahead and with our finger, we're going to, with these two fingers, our left hand fingers, we're going to go ahead and control the shaft. And then with our right hand, we're going to be placing the new bevel gear. So what I'm doing right now is actually I'm using my pinky to go from underneath the shaft to help support it upwards, and then I'm using my thumb to help with the adjustments, fine adjustments. That way we can get it on the shaft. Once it's on the shaft here and it's free from the metal bevel gear, we can go ahead with the next. So now to give you an idea as to what we're going to be doing next, we are specifically, let me pull this aside momentarily. We're specifically going to be, my finger is going to be here. That way I can move the shaft a little bit. What we're going to be looking for, or what we're going to be doing, is going ahead with this bevel gear. Once it hits, wow, words are difficult. With this bevel gear, this is going to be your new bevel gear, in our situation a used one, or this original one. What we're going to be doing is going ahead and putting the bevel gear on, and we're going to be trying to feel, as we select one screw, we're going to be identifying and feeling if it is going into a little groove here, that groove there. And if it's not, then we're going to have to, like, no matter what rotation of the shaft you're on, then what we're going to do is go ahead and switch from that screw and try screwing or loosening this screw again and trying again with this screw, so that we can identify that groove. Or in the case of you feel confident enough to put on the bevel gear again, you're just going to go ahead and remove it, have that groove facing upwards. We're going to go ahead and place the bevel gear. With either one of these, they're always different, so it's a little guesstimation. I'm going to go ahead and place it as such, and then I'll get back. So once again, just putting on the bevel gear, and this time I'm actually going ahead, like I did state earlier, I'm going to be putting the left hand side upwards towards that groove. So I'm going to control the shaft with my two fingers on the left hand, and then with my pinky and thumb on my left hand, I'm going to go ahead and control the bevel gear to place it in. Once we have it in, that's when you can go ahead with the tightening. But before you actually begin any of the tightening, well, we're just doing the tightening just so that we can identify that groove. So we're going to go ahead and slightly push it, tighten it, and feel for that groove. If you can move the shaft up and down like so, that means you should be in the groove. So at this point, we're going to loosen again. We know where the groove is. The shaft is facing upwards. Everything is good. And now with your tool here, we're going to go with a 0.005 as our first measurement. I'm going to just push this in between the bevel gear and the washer that we had placed earlier. And just make sure to get it in there. There we go. And just tighten it tightly. And make sure you're pushing the bevel gear away from you as you are tightening. and keep that 0.005 wedged in there. Once you've gone ahead and tightened it, that's the point where we can go with our 2 fingers back here and see if we can give it a little wiggle. In this case, there's a little bit of a wiggle, so what we're gonna do is loosen the bevel gear again, move it forward towards us, and then we're gonna go ahead and move up on the grade here. Rather than 0.005, we're gonna go ahead with 0.006. So with a 0.006, just go ahead and slide it back into place and push the bevel gear up towards it. Now this is actually going to be a really important step. If you do miss this step or you don't do it exactly, you could be experiencing a lot of needle breaks. The hook timing is going to be off no matter what, and you're also going to be experiencing a lot of just difficulties while trying to run the machine. So it is highly recommended to just be patient whenever you're pushing this, putting this in, and make sure you are actually applying the proper amount of pressure to the bevel gear away from you. That way you can go ahead, slide the sheet out and give it another test. This one seems to have some more play, so we're going to go ahead and loosen and continue until we actually have no play, moving the shaft forward and back. At maximum, we've only had to ever go up to 0.009 for the bevel gear, but in your situation, you should not have to go that high. It should be around 0.005 to 0.008. Now go ahead and do the last one on my. So I had to remove the bevel gear because I was on the wrong screw. I was trying to identify why it wouldn't go down smoothly, and it was because of the wrong screw. So now I've gone ahead and rotated the screw, making sure that I'm still in the groove. And before we go ahead and tighten, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the tool and everything past or before the gold strip. Let me move this thread. Everything before the gold strip, we're gonna go ahead and try in terms of for the distance, to identify the distance, the correct distance. So we're not gonna go ahead with this one, the 0.035, nor will we do 0.1 or 0.015. We won't be using the 0.025. We'll just mainly be focusing on the 0.00 numbers. So from 0.2 till 0.9 is what we're gonna go ahead and test. I'm gonna go ahead and use the 0.2. And just to clarify some communications that I did just state earlier, the 0.05 is actually not what is most typically put onto the machine. Typically is actually going to be 0.02 here. We have been using 0.05 recently a lot more. That is why the confusion in the information that I had provided earlier is there. But it is most likely not going to be it for this machine. We're going to go ahead with 0.02, and then we'll continue by placing the sheet back behind, pressing it down, And then just to make sure we have it properly pressed down, I'm going to hold it from back here and press it into each other. And now making sure I'm in the groove. Go ahead and bring it out. Bring it back in. Then press it into each other. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten. Now when you're tightening, you do want to be a little bit more tighter than you, just as tight as it is when you had to loosen it. So you are going to be a little bit tight. There we go. That feels tight. And the test that we're going to do is go ahead and give it a little front and back. You should hear a small click whenever you're doing a front and back. Like you're moving it front and back. Mainly you're not going to feel it, but you hear it. That's good. And then we're going to do a little rotating. Once the rotating aspect of it is just to actually verify and testing the machine, not the machine, but the bevel gear, and making sure that it actually is in its space. Because if you're not able to rotate it and it's not moving front and back, you don't hear any clicking, that's actually good. That means that we have it correctly distanced. If you are hearing clicking whenever you're rotating it like this, that means you are not correct. You need to go ahead and try a different measurement here. It could be from the 0.002 to 0.004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Any of these 0.00s are going to be the points that you're going to be looking for in this bevel gear. And once you have both, once everything's been pushed, or once you make sure it's all correct, at this point you can go ahead and tighten the second screw. And then with the second screw, go ahead and just tighten it down as we have done before. All right, we'll just finish tightening it here. There you go. And that is going to be the replacement of the bevel gear itself. Next, we're going to go ahead with putting in the metal bevel gear in properly. Now this gear is going to be the most tricky, as you're going to need to place it. And as you move the plastic metal bevel gear, tap it back just slightly. Because what we're looking for in terms of the bevel gear is actually for the bevel gears to be just about touching and moving each other, not intertwined and then trying to move each other. Because if they're as intertwined, it is going to apply more pressure on the plastic bevel gear than it is necessary, and it can actually handle. So you're going to want to just find the sweet spot on your bevel gear that moves it but still gives it some wiggle room, primarily for the plastic. And once you believe you have it, give the metal bevel gear a tighten without moving it. And then just to make sure that you are still in the clear, you want to give it a little wiggle, and then also move the main shaft and observing the bevel gear and making sure that it also is moving. As such. So once again, you want to be able to have the bevel gear itself move slightly. And then whenever the main shaft, which is this one, has been moved, the bevel gear follows along with it. But it still does have that little wiggle room or little playroom that it needs to make sure that the bevel gear, the plastic bevel gear, doesn't have too much pressure applied on it. So once you have got it down properly, you should actually, this is the correct amount of distance or play that it should have. I actually had to get our churro to go ahead and get the teeth distance correct. But this is the play that you're looking for. And then if we were to go ahead and take a look at the main shaft spin, we can see that it spins relatively freely, but it does have just a little bit of play, just enough for the bevel gear itself. Gauging that distance is actually going to be a lot more tricky than you gauging the distance between the teeth is actually going to be relatively difficult, but it is possible, as our churro did just come in and just more or less swept in and did it or demonstrated for me. And then once you finish getting the distance correct, go ahead and just tighten everything else down. We're gonna tighten it with the same amount of strength that it was when you had to unloosen it. So once everything has been tightened down, you can do one final check, making sure everything is actually spinning. I'm gonna go ahead and move the main shaft. And what we're mainly doing, why we're mainly spinning the main shaft, is just to get a feel of the bevel gear itself. If it's a little rough or hard to turn in certain areas, that maybe, or that's going to indicate that the bevel gear is incorrect. The distance between the distance that we had gauged with our tool was most likely incorrect. And that's what we're primarily looking out for. So whenever you're just spinning the main shaft, please do be on the lookout for that. And once again, you're going to be spinning the main shaft from underneath the machine, or from underneath here, rather than what I'm doing, because I'm just doing it as I have access to it on the last head of this machine. If you were changing the bevel gear on the last head of your machine, then feel free to do the same, but primarily you're going to be reaching underneath, attempting to reach the bevel or the main shaft underneath the head of the machine. And then once everything has been tightened down and it's in place, there's just a little bit of wiggle room to everything. Then you can go ahead with some grease and apply them along the teeth of the metal gear. As far along the metal gear you can go. And then go ahead and rotate the shaft again, and we'll continue from that.